Okay, so this represents the women, and it means that we don't get power from this, in this wampum, but it represents the fact that we do have this very important power to take care of the land, to take care of all life on Earth, and for us to bring the people onto the Earth to do the same thing, to carry out our duties and responsibilities. I now have from the knowledge keeper. Well, he and I worked on this, and I will read to you what the message that we decided to give to everybody, including the Supreme Court of Canada. We find ourselves in ongoing violation of the Deo Hade, the Turo, which is the agreement made between us in the beginning of our relationship. We have tried to alert the Crown that there is a violation going on, which places both of us in rough waters. Today we stand in front of the Supreme Court of Canada, facing a political violation by the people of Canada that we wish to discuss so that we may get justice. We have come to your front door carrying the Turo, which you agreed to abide by after coming off your ship to visit our land. You agreed to follow our process as brothers and sisters to deal with any issues that comes between us. We stand in front of you today with peace, power, and righteousness to try to resolve this violation that has come between us. If the judges have questions on how to proceed, we would be glad to answer your questions. We can enter the court, but not beyond the rail of the judge's chamber. We can go as far as the rail. With all due respect to the court, we cannot go any further without breaking the international agreements that have been made between us. We are total sovereigns on this land, which has never changed. We need your process to respect the Deo Hade, Turo, and a political process needs to begin so that it is possible for the court that we must respect the Turo and deal with this on a Crown level. You cannot make decisions over us. We are here because our visitors have put us under duress. We have come to the forum of your federal government to deal with this issue nation to nation, not indigenous people to the court. The judge has to safeguard our rights. We are part of the Iroquois Confederacy. We have a right and responsibility to represent ourselves to the best of our ability. We all have a responsibility to protect our land and people. If the Prime Minister wants to appoint the judge to represent his people, it needs to be recorded, as we do not want to violate our international agreements that were made between our peoples. We wish we had seen our children who were taken from us. We wanted to see them grow up among us, but we couldn't because we never saw them again when they were taken. We ask, what will happen now? No one has greater power than nature. In their time of need, we took you in and sheltered you. The Goa, the Great Peace, was fully explained to you, and you accepted our gifts. Otherwise, you would not have been able to stay here. Let us clear the air as creation intended.
I have just a few words that I would like to share with everybody. Segon zeo guego, what gonum verado, garufinorum unjax, canestage ni de wagenum tanu wagenado, te wasa asana te wagoseriado, jage genagere, Dano McGill University Yinderi o Yanstahwa. Kate Hunsan Nuha. Hello everyone, my name is Gurung Hyanorum. My family is from Ganisitauge and I belong to the Turtle Clan. I'm 23 years old and I live in Montreal where I study at McGill University. I'm also an archaeologist, but in my language, Ungwehumeneha, I say that I protect the land, because for me there is no difference between being an archaeologist and a land defender. I am honored to be here today in front of the Supreme Court, standing amongst my friends and family. I am humbled by this opportunity to share a few words with you. Words are powerful. The stories we tell ourselves are powerful. The story that Canada has been telling itself for the past 200 years is a story that seeks to erase the original peoples of an entire continent. This continent, Anohuarege, or Turtle Island. This story, this Canadian story, is so fragile that it must be supported by institutional scaffolding on all sides. This is necessary when your narrative is based in neither truth nor natural law, for it cannot exist without being propped up by something else. Most of these props are themselves untruths, like terra nullius, the suggestion that this land was home to no one, and terra derelicte, the suggestion that if this land was once home to someone, it is not anymore. Other untruths that support this story are that indigenous peoples have been conquered and that we should just accept our fate. I ask you, which fate? While it may be true of your story that all the Indians die at the end, this is not the story Ungwehunwe have been telling ourselves. Our story not only has a future, but it goes on without ending. This is because we have a responsibility to those not yet born to ensure that life will go on and to leave the earth in a better shape than we found her. I have worked alongside the Ganyankahaga Ganistansra as an archaeological monitor for the past 2 years of my life. In this time, I have realized the power of archaeology to disrupt and change our present reality, much more so than I ever had during my university education. I have felt the unrelenting pressure of this thing called law, this abstraction that insists that only certain voices are heard and that these voices must be constantly appeased. I have seen and experienced cruelty beyond my imagination. I know no other archaeologists who have had the police called them in the middle of doing their job. I can think of no other field site that looks and operates like an open-air prison. Perhaps it was naive of me to believe that my university and the province of Quebec would agree that protecting the unmarked graves of Indigenous children is more important than a campus redevelopment project. I have read a lot about the history of archaeology in this country and how it has dispossessed Ungwahumwe of so much of our inheritance. I often ask myself if I'm going down the right path and if archaeology is really the way to go about changing things for my family. Yet even though I have experienced barrier upon barrier to entering the field and doing archaeology in a way that explicitly addresses the needs of Ungwahumwe, the ground has never disappointed me. The children have never stopped speaking their truth. They righteously insist over and over and over again that it is time. Historic human remains detection dogs first picked up their scent at the Royal Victoria Hospital in Montreal on June 9th, 2023. Since then, they have detected 2 more sites that potentially contain human remains. Ground-penetrating radar has detected dozens upon dozens of anomalies on the grounds, a majority of which have yet to be investigated. The problem, as I see it, is not archaeology, but a question, as one of my dear friends put it, of who is wielding the trowel. It is beyond time for non-Ungwehunwe to let go of the authority they granted themselves over the lives of Indigenous peoples past and present. We are in control of our own destinies. That is why we are gathered here today in front of the Supreme Court. I ask you, what will you do about your destinies? To reiterate what was said by my fellow Ganisatawagairon, Kimberly Murray, in her interim report on missing children and unmarked burials, Canadians can no longer be bystanders in reconciliations. Canadians cannot take pride in a country that permits the burials of children to be violently disrespected, allows shovels to dig into the bones of ancestors, and hides from the truth. The fact of the matter is that we are getting closer to the truth every single day, and we will not rest until we bring our children home. Toki niigo. Our next speaker is Gwedio Wakskareoge. She is also one of the Gani Sansara. I forgot to mention that before. Gahandineta is also one of the Gani Sansara. So yeah, I'll pass the mic to her.
Y'all go off for coming to attend and to listen, have your minds open. Today we're also joined by those we're here to protect. Our ancestors, the Ungwahumwe alive today, and the coming faces of our future generations. They're watching us today as we set out to do something that's never done before, something that's long overdue. Today we filed with the Supreme Court to protect our right to an independent investigation to search for our missing children and to protect our inherent right to caretake our land in accordance with the Great Peace, the Guyana at Goa. Our people have had enough. We've had enough of being treated like our lives matter less. Enough of being treated like people doomed to disappear. We've had enough of the government giving us the runaround when we try to defend our rights. Enough of waking up prepared for this next government initiative designed to get rid of us, like they always have. We've had enough of being treated like a burden, like the Indian detail that they have to get rid of so settlers can consume the wealth of the earth, our mother, without having to deal with the inconvenience of our persisting presence, fulfilling our duty to take care of the land. More than anything, we've had enough of having to worry about our children, our babies being brutally taken from our homes and communities by residential schools, the RCMP, the child welfare system. They take our children for the same reasons that tens of thousands of Palestinian children have been killed in the last year alone. They want to wipe us out, all Indigenous people, to colonize our lands and erase us from its history. They've said so themselves, that what they've done and continue to do is genocide. Genocidally murdering children is one of the worst things imaginable. Yet it keeps being done with total impunity. What does it mean for the Prime Minister to acknowledge that these systems are part of a genocide? If we still have to fight every day to protect our babies and to uncover the truth of what was done to us, every day we have to fight developers and bureaucrats, and we're forced to watch caterpillars tearing apart our land. I don't think it's coincidence that these institutions we have to fight in court are the same institutions that help to fund the weapons being used to kill children in the Middle East. These institutions have fought us every step of the way to hide what they've done to us, to our babies and to our cultures. They're institutions of white supremacy, of ongoing colonization and genocide. One thing that all genocidal institutions have in common is the way that they decide that some human lives are worth more than others. One look at the death tolls in the war on Palestine will show you exactly how little they think Indigenous lives are worth. Here, they target us, the Ungwe, because we resist. And in spite of their best efforts, we continue to exist. Because of our refusal to disappear, we were used as test subjects for CIA-funded experiments that taught them how to terrorize and subdue people. McGill and the Canadian military and their allies sent in anthropologists and sociologists to Kahnawake to study us, to put our minds under a microscope, and to figure out how to break us. They wanted to figure out how to make us forget our ways and our ceremonies, our language, our children, and force us to become Canadians, good workers and consumers. They wanted to find a way to break the code of our resistance and take away our freedom and independence, and to change our minds. Our elders tell us, "Dosazahumta." Nayesid, Nigorla. Don't let them take your mind. Our word for mind is Otnigurla. This word means protection. Specifically, the protection the corn husk provides each corn kernel, which gives us sustenance in life. Our minds do the same. They help us stay strong and to survive through the generations of violence we've suffered through. They tried to take our children and their minds in those CIA experiments. In Kahnawake and Gansadage, McGill sent out psychiatrists with IQ tests to find out how to assimilate us. The military also ran these programs in many other Indigenous communities. If a child was seen as too smart, too able, too much of a threat to their oppressive systems, they were labeled troublesome and sent away. They tried to break their minds and spirits. Many of these children never came home and will never stop looking for them and the truth of what happened to them. 2 years ago, in October 2022, we were the first Indigenous people to obtain an injunction in the Canadian court without any lawyers. We stopped the work at Royal Victoria Hospital and the Allen Memorial Institute, where McGill in Quebec had started excavating for a development project. They were already ignoring our requests to search for unmarked graves before construction started. We made those requests because of testimonies that missing children were buried there, both from the modern medical experiments and from our ancestors who lived there before the Europeans came. Traces of our ancestral homes keep being found by accident on Deganundak, which they call Mount Royal. Most recently, in 2017, a whole longhouse and burials were found on the corner of Peel and Sherbrooke, just in front of McGill's Roddick Gates. They were found next to old sewers, only uncovered because the pipes needed to be replaced. Because of the way archaeology is being done now, because they're more concerned with project deadlines than respecting our ancestors, there's so many of our missing relatives who were never found. But now there's tools like ground-penetrating radar and historic human remain detection dogs that can find those graves without even breaking ground and disturbing our ancestors. Those are the tools we need to use, and which are now being used at the former residential schools throughout Canada to find unmarked graves of our missing children. In June of 2023, we brought in those search dogs who detected the smell of human remains right in the same zone that McGill's archaeological experts told us was empty. Since then, the dogs found 2 other locations on the Royal Victoria Hospital site where there's evidence of unmarked graves. This search was made possible by an agreement we painstakingly negotiated with the other side. We entrusted a jointly appointed independent panel of archaeologists who specialize in searching for unmarked graves with the task of deciding how the investigation should proceed. It was common sense that to resolve our dispute, we would need a third party. A third party with the right expertise that we could trust. But the panel's participation would be short-lived. Pretty soon, McGill and the SQI, Quebec's infrastructure agency, started cherry-picking the panel's recommendations, respecting the ones that seemed convenient and rejecting others. They refused the panel's recommendation to use forensic caution as they dug up evidence from the ground. As a result of the chain of custody was lost and all the evidence was made useless. Where the dogs first alerted, we found a woman's dress, a child's shoe from the first half of the 20th century, and many other worrying things, including tons of bones. But to this day, we never had any follow-up about them. The panel also asked to sift excavated soil immediately to keep the archaeological context in place, but McGill and the SQI decided they didn't want to do that. Instead, they left the piles to rot under the sun and rain for 3 months before moving them to a site entirely different. Our cultural monitors and archaeologists insisted that moving the soil would damage the fragile bones it contained, but we were ignored. They ended up sifting the heavy, wet piles of dirt with a huge mechanical sifter, one made for mining, not for archaeology. Once they passed it through that machine, everything was reduced to dust. Then the archaeologists told us that the bones were now too small to identify. The damage was done. It wasn't easy for our people to work up there. The workers were told to ignore us. The security firm that they hired tried to attack us, one day throwing out racist insults and physically assaulting one of us, who filmed their words. They snatched the phone out of her hands and erased the evidence. We were told this incident would be investigated, but more than a year later, they never came back to us. We ended up stumbling on the exact security guard somewhere else on the site after McGill promised they wouldn't be allowed back on site. They lied to our faces. Another day, one of us found another child's shoe that looked very similar to the first one. It had been tossed aside into a ditch and no one could tell us how this could have happened. The panel's recommendations were supposed to be legally binding, were breached with impunity, and all the evidence that was found ended up being damaged or disappearing. We constantly asked McGill and the SQI to remedy this situation, but they wouldn't talk. In August, after the panel asked to review the data from the ground-penetrating radar, McGill and SQI responded by firing them, taking control of the whole investigation. Into crimes we suspect their own employees committed. They turned our agreement upside down and twisted its words to exclude the panel and us entirely. McGill and the SQI decided they could investigate themselves and we would have to take their word for it. We might as well get rid of the whole penal system and let murderers investigate themselves. When we saw how corrupted the investigation had become, we had no choice but to go back to the court to report everything we saw. After all, the agreement was meant to be legally binding document that had been homologated by the court. The Superior Court ended up judging in our favor once again. They saw and acknowledged that we were in the same hopeless situation that brought us to court in the first place. with McGill and SQI acting unilaterally and blatantly violating the agreement we signed. The judge agreed that only a third party like the panel could resolve these disagreements and revive the spirit of reconciliation we thought those institutions had committed to. He saw that the investigation was falling apart in the absence of the panel's direction, so he ordered McGill and SQI to abide by the agreement and the panel's recommendations. After months of hard work, we were relieved by this decision, but McGill and SQI could not comply. They decided to appeal it, using tuition money and taxpayers' dollars to fight against us and the Superior Court's decision. They can talk all they want about reconciliation, but when you follow the money, you see how much is spent fighting against our human rights. At one point, there were 17 lawyers on the other side of the table facing us, all working against us poor women. The court is not our way. Our way is Gayanar Goa. Calls for respectful discussions and taking time to come to an understanding. Yet right now, in 2024, we all have to spend our whole lives and countless resources to protect the most basic of our human rights. The Court of Appeal reversed the judgment. It found that the Superior Court judge had, quote, misapprehended the scope of his power to make safeguard orders, close quote. Even though the law clearly gives judges the power to make tailored decisions for special circumstances, the Quebec Court of Appeal found there was some technical problem somewhere that canceled it. They never said that we were wrong for flagging all the breaches to the agreement. In fact, they didn't say anything at all about the actual facts of the case or any of its merits. Everything we've given to the court, thousands of words in the honor of the Crown, and the requirement to respect our original agreements like the Turo and the Silver Covenant chain, were simply disregarded. The Court of Appeal said it wouldn't opine on them and canceled the judgment for a technical reason that even lawyers struggle to understand. So that's why we're here at the Supreme Court, because our ancestors and our future generations are watching us and pushing us to do everything we can to enforce our rights, their rights, and put it to an end forever to the dark history that makes up this country. Truth comes before reconciliation, and we're hopeful that Canadians and their Supreme Court will see that, just like we're so grateful, just for which we're so grateful. It's something that our word for Indigenous people is Ungwehungwe, which means the people of the way of creation. That's something that everyone can follow, as long as they respect all living things, as we see many of you doing today. It's something we offer to your ancestors when they first came here to take shelter with us beneath the great white pine. Many joined us, but greed and power brought others to cut down that tree and start driving us away from our mother. But we're still here, and we will never disappear. Nyawa for your support.
Lovely Kimberly Murray, wherever she went, taking shelter from the rain.
I'm Kimberly Murray. I'm the Independent Special Interlocutor for Missing Children and Unmarked Graves. I came here today to Ottawa to support the Ganastasra as they filed their leave to appeal materials. Thank you. As they filed their leave to appeal materials. I was a party in the proceedings below at the Quebec Court of Appeal and at the Quebec Superior Court. It was really important that I participate to give context to the court about the unmarked burials across the country. We know that the unmarked burials are not just at Indian residential schools. We know that children were transferred between different institutions, including being sent to the Royal Victoria Hospital and the Allen Memorial. I want to remind everybody how significant this case was, because these women went to court not represented by lawyers, argued Indigenous law, they argued Haudenosaunee law, and the Great Law, and it was accepted by the court. Justice Moore accepted Indigenous laws into the colonial legal system, and that is really significant. What turned out to be what we thought was a great precedent to go across the country for Indigenous people seeking access to justice has now fallen off the rails. As was said, as we got closer to the truth, when we found bones, when we had human remain detection dogs sent human remains, when we found shoes of children, everything was getting shut down. And the lawyers were not practicing law or lawyering for reconciliation. They were putting up every barrier they could to stop these people from getting to the truth. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission wrote about the failures of the justice system. There's 2 full chapters in the final report of the TRC on the justice system. And the TRC said that the law, the Canadian law, has been used to oppress Indigenous people for decades. The TRC has said that the law has operated to stop the truth from coming out. The TRC said that Indigenous laws need to be applied when we're dealing with Indigenous matters and realities. And so I support this application, this leave to appeal. It's of national importance. We do not have a national law to protect the burial grounds of Indigenous ancestors. We do not have proper provincial territorial laws to protect the burial grounds of our ancestors. I'm releasing my final report on October 29th in Toronto. I have a whole chapter in my final report about the failure of the justice system or the legal system and how it hasn't protected Indigenous burial grounds. It hasn't protected the ancestors. And so we need to do better. We also, this country signed the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People. We have the UN Declaration Act in this country, where we're supposed to be applying the UN Declaration. The UN Declaration recognizes Indigenous laws. It recognizes the importance of our ancestors and protecting our ancestors. And so today, they filed their materials in the Supreme Court of Canada. They have to get leave, and we'll be watching closely and hope that all Canadians will pay attention to this case. So with that, I'll just say now go on. Thank you.
Okay. So now we do have a short amount of time. If anyone has questions, you can ask them now. I will ask Raj and Phil to please come over and assist with this, as they are our press experts.
Well, if there's no questions, there's no questions. Yeah.
Well, how long are you expecting reaction? Like how long is the court expecting to take?
I personally don't know how much time it usually takes. How much time it's going to take to have a reaction? Do you know?
I haven't been following the Supreme Court's timelines lately, but it takes months before you will hear a decision back from the Supreme Court on the documentation.
I assume work's still ongoing at the Guild then? Work's still ongoing at the Guild? Like are they?
Oh, yeah, I'll leave that for the
Yeah, so the question was, is there still work going on at McGill? And I can just speak from my own perspective. I was there yesterday, and construction is still ongoing, both at the Royal Victoria Hospital and the Allen Memorial Institute. There are certain areas where the scent of human remains has been detected, and so far those have not been disturbed beyond like how I saw them last. But it's still concerning that construction work is going on around these areas because, as I've heard Gordillo say and as I've seen, like any small kind of disturbance can truly have a devastating impact on the discoveries that we find throughout the archaeological investigation. But short answer, yes, work is ongoing. It's not planned to stop at all.
That's it? Okay, well, I think that's it.
Any more questions?
I just want to thank you all for coming here and standing with us, listening to us, trying to understand us, because we do have a very hard time because we've been at this for years now, and so very few people know what we're doing, and yet it is something that's going to affect all of Canada. It's going to affect you, and sometimes, you know, when we ask some of the people who listen to us, we ask them, we say, how many of you go and vote in the elections? And they all raise their hands proudly that they vote. And I say, do you know what you're voting for? You are actually voting to have us killed and done away with. That's what the Indian Act and all the Indian Lands Act, the Civilization Act, all of those laws are for that, is to do away with us, to annihilate us. And they're still on the books, and nobody will ever be charged. Nobody will ever, there'll be nobody to blame for all of these murders that have taken place of our people. And so I just think that you people who are so concerned about we don't call it a country because it's not a country. It is still, it is still just, you know, I don't even know what to call it anymore. What do we call it now? But anyway, it is not a country.
A genocide.
Settler colony.
Yes, it's still a colony. Yes, and then you are settlers, and you came here. Why? Because you heard that you could come over here and kill your ancestors, not you, but you still come over here because your ancestors have set the tone for them to come over here because they came over here being told that they could, that this was stolen land and you can come here and you can build a new world for yourself here, but you have to kill off the people. And so they started to do that, and at the beginning, yes, they were very terrible, ruthless, and they did do that. They did kill off a lot of us. And survived that. We're the survivors. So, but we have our duties from our creation that we have to keep going. And so we're asking you to stand with us. And we are grateful that you've come here. And I hope that's what you came here to do, to get more information. But there's lots of information. And we are strong. We are very strong because we're part of creation.